Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this explosive event. And thank you for joining us for the artist talk of the exhibition Sanctuaries. This exhibition is presented by Gallery 1C03 in collaboration with the curatorial team Patterns Collective, which is comprised of Chukwudubem Ukaigwe, Shaneela Boodoo, and Mahlet. And the Sanctuaries exhibition proposes perceptions of the female body within a contemporary frame that is removed from conventionality. It pulls works from artists such as Akum Madoka, Anik Jordan, Rajni Pereira, as well as the architect Odudu Umoesien, who designed and rendered the virtual housing space. And this exhibition revisits the idea of the self-gaze in digital realms and explores agency in terms of self-portrayal and self-determination. Each artist's works addresses themes of the body and identity from a lens pointing back at their singular and collective selves, given the harsh realities faced by racialized peoples navigating colonial spaces. So before I hand things over to Patterns Collective to begin the discussion, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Winnipeg, from where we are running this event, sits in Treaty 1 territory, the ancestral and traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe peoples. Treaty 1 took this territory from 7 local Anishinaabe First Nations in order to make the land available for settler use and ownership. And it is in this spirit of acknowledging past and present structures and systems of oppression and injustice that I invite Patterns Collective to discuss their powerful exhibition that is addressed to questions about justice, agency, and the humanization of those who have been historically and presently dehumanized. So it's over to Patterns Collective. And thank you for joining us again.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I would like to thank our sponsors and partners, starting with the UofW, University of Winnipeg, Take Home, BIPOC Art House, the Manitoba Arts Council, Black Mosaic, La Maison des Artistes, Winnipeg Arts Council, ERCOM. We appreciate your time, energy, and efforts in making our project come alive. While thanking our sponsors, I want to point out that granting systems are most times not accessible and are used as a tool for harmful division within marginalized communities. And they have not accommodated groups of multiple groups of people who are key players in the arts ecosystem. We challenge granting bodies such as Winnipeg Arts Council and Manitoba Arts Council to make their grants more accessible to everyone that applies. We are also, I should mention that, we are very, very excited about this show and the success it has garnered so far. I want to mention that this show has been included into particular curriculums in various classes at the University of Winnipeg, as well as various classes in the University of Manitoba, specifically the School of Fine Art and the Faculty of Architecture. I'm going to hand over to Shaneela to take over.
Yeah, we just also wanted to say just a small thing about Truth and Reconciliation Day. So as tomorrow is Truth and Reconciliation Day, we not only want to acknowledge this day being set as a day of grieving, mourning, and reflecting, we all want you to take action in ways to inform yourself on residential schools, the history behind it, and the ways that colonization affects Indigenous peoples today. So the ways you can take action is through donating to organizations such as the Indian Residential School Survivors Society, National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, and the Legacy of Hope Foundation. Reading and watching films about residential schools and taking initiatives in your own communities, educating friends, families, and loved ones about the harm that the Canadian government has done to Indigenous people across Turtle Island, and specifically in Manitoba. So I'm also going to hand it over to the amazing Mahlet to introduce our artists for this talk.
Thanks so much, Shaneela Boodoo, Dr. Anyaduba. But yeah, we can kind of get into the conversation. But before we do that, I want to introduce the artist and the architect. So we'll first start off with Odudu. So Odudu Umoyasin is a Nigerian-born storyteller and multidisciplinary artist exploring the relationship between human perception and natural world, which he translates into expressions of light and space through architecture. He has presented his work locally at the Winnipeg Design Festival and now lives and works as an architecture designer in Toronto. One of the artists in the exhibition, so Akum Aduka. Akum is a Winnipeg-based emerging artist with Nigerian roots. Her intimate drawings entwine these narratives with ongoing lived experiences as she examines the potency and complexity of gender roles, sexuality, desire, ethnicity, and modern society. Next up, so Rajni Pereira. Rajni was born in Sri Lanka in 1985 and lives and works in Toronto. Rajni's work has shown across Canada internationally, including Loca Toronto, Mackenzie Art Gallery, and Centre Phi, to name a few. And the last artist that's a part of this amazing exhibition is Anik Jordan. Anik is an award-winning artist, writer, and curator who has presented her work across Canada and internationally. Her work creates space to reinterpret the archives of offering a new and speculative vision of the future. So yeah, these are our artists. And now to kind of start off the conversation, we want to hand it off to Odudu to kind of explain how he came up with the ideas, how we were able to kind of come together and figure out how to make this otherworldly space. And he'll kind of show a presentation. And then after that, we'll talk to the artists and see what their experiences were, as well as their art practice. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Odudu Umoyasin, and what I love to do the most is to take abstract ideas, put them together so I can build a narrative, and then use that narrative to drive or to express that idea physically, so that anyone can experience it or interact with it, you know, in person or in these COVID times virtually. So I think this is important because, like they say, experience is the best teacher. In order to communicate any idea, you know, experience is the best and the most effective way of communicating it. So I'm gonna just very, very short presentation. I'm just gonna talk about how I was able to do that with Sanctuaries with the help of all of the artists, and hopefully you can use that in your own work as well. So when I was approached by Dubem for the show, I think the most intriguing thing about like all the work was, of course, that they're so unique. They're telling very different stories, very powerful stories, but in completely different ways. And you can see like the style is so different. And I think my job was to find a way to create a space where all of this work could live and they could live together, and to reiterate the idea of the show. And so the first thing, of course, was to find the ideas. And the things that I picked from the work, looking all together with these three words, this idea of femininity, this idea of the body, and this idea of sanctuary. So those were the three ideas. So of course, I started to look for inspiration, and I looked to nature for that inspiration. And I think the first thing, of course, was the betta fish, which I absolutely love. It's native to South Asia. Just the way the fins flow. This has these beautiful fins, very soft, very warm. And then also the flower, which has all throughout history been a symbol of fertility, a symbol of, you know, even till today, women still wear like these flower crowns on their head, you know, to celebrate like their fertility. So I thought that was a very interesting way to go. And so I started to look at the structure of the flower as well. And one thing that was interesting to me was how all of these petals kind of the petals of the flower kind of guard the ovary at the center. I thought that was interesting. And looking at the structure of the petal as well, this idea of elegance, this idea of fluidity, and this idea of mothering that ovary at the center. And I started to draw relationships between that and the body as well. And so from there, I started to sketch. And yeah, I just had to get all of the terrible ideas out. I did a lot of sketches, but these are the worst ones. And it was important for me to just get all the bad ideas out first. But I think the key thing was for me to retain this idea of the Trinity, like these 3 entrances, 3 petals, and something that just repeats this idea of 3. And then, of course, it ended up being this very simple structure with 3 petals guarding the space at the center. And I thought, okay, typically in a gallery, you would have the work just put on a wall, right? And then you would move through this gallery space and see all the work on the wall. But I thought, well, why don't I try something else where instead of going through these hallways and seeing all the work on the wall, we have a situation where all of the work would be displayed all at once. And then, of course, just in the construction of this, of the space, it was important to maintain that idea of softness, idea of warmth, fluidity. And that's why I tried not to have any edges, in the entrance, to keep, even in the details, to keep everything soft. The kind of stare I chose as well, just going back to the structure of the petal. And then I kind of the idea was that each artist would do whatever they want with their petal, really. And then you could see here Anik's petal is kind of opening up because she wanted her work to be displayed kind of in like dew on the surface of a flower. So hers began to open up. And then Akum's petal, she wanted her work to be suspended from above. So her petal kind of grew in size and to support the work, like hanging from above. And then I started to look towards this idea of like the veins on the body. So these tubes these veins kind of serve as like structural, they serve structural purposes in a way like they are the way you would have reinforcement in a wall, for example. But of course, I wanted to also reiterate that idea of elegance, that idea of fluidity. So I had fun building this as well. And that's what is going to hold the structure up. And then that's how you start to have this idea of these standing petals, with these veins running through them, guarding the work at the center. And then that became this. And then you have this space here. And this was where I then started to look for, okay, what's the skin of this thing going to be like? How is it going to feel from the outside? What texture am I going to have? And I started to look at precedents. One interesting precedent is this amazing house, Casa Mila, by the legendary Anthony Gaudi. I don't know if I said that right, but he does very, very amazing work. And I look to him a lot for the texture. This project and also the Baha'i Temple in Chile by Hariri Pantorini Architects, Siamak Hariri. So I was looking at those 2 structures because they have this very feminine vibe to them. So, and then it was after this that we end up with the final work, which is this very interesting pink onyx petal, this idea of like the softness, the elegance, the strength, each of the petals standing tall, guarding the work. And you don't see anything from the outside until you go into the space. So that's just a quick walkthrough of how I came up with the space. And with the help of the amazing artists, I think it was really successful. And we got a lot of good feedback. So I think here I'm just going to walk through the space a little bit. It takes a little bit of time to load, but queuing, so there's definitely other people in. So I'm just going to do a very quick walkthrough of the space, and then just talk a little bit about the experience and really making sure that when you enter into the space, it doesn't feel like it's just something on Google Maps where you're just walking through this, flat thing. I wanted it to feel alive, to give it some, added dimension of time and light, so it feels real. Any time now for this. Seems like there's some other people on the in the space. That's why it's taking some time. But if you have any questions, please, while we're waiting, please ask away.
Or if you're looking at the space right now while this talk is going, also comment and say something. Like, oh, I'm in the space right now. I'm looking while you guys talk.
Yeah. There are multiple people in the space right now.
That's definitely true.
And they're probably in this talk.
Okay, so we are in, I think. So I think when we're talking about how to make it feel as real as possible, music was the
I
key
actually
thing.
can't see it. It's like, oh, there we go. Now it's working. We're good.
Can you hear it as well?
Yeah.
So this idea of, is it smooth or is it lagging at all?
It's lagging like a tiny bit, but it's not too bad.
So you come into the space and you have, I like it because when you reach the space, it's already nighttime. And you cannot see Anit's work at all, which I think when we talked about it, she was saying she wanted to, she was thinking of how she can make it skin as dark as possible. You cannot see any work at nighttime in this space, which I absolutely love. So this is the main space of the bottom, and then you go up. The stars are out, the sun is just coming out, and Anit's work is completely black, which I absolutely just love. I feel like I wish I had more time to develop the ideas a lot more, but I really like the way it turned out. And you can see Rajni's beautiful objects slowly animated. And then if you look to the right, you can see Hakun's work suspended from the wall.
There's one question, Odudu. I don't know if you want to answer it after you show the space. And also someone said, Ren Lam said, this is so gorgeous, crazy, in the comments.
Yeah, I was gonna wait until he was done talking, and then I can ask you the question.
Of course, please. Okay. I don't know if anyone ever did this in the experience, but you can. This is the best way to see Rajni's work for me. Is this way. It's very, very tricky. Which I love.
Yeah, I did that.
I was trying to like show someone the other day, like the light on the inside, and it's like kind of tricky to maneuver to look at it.
Yeah, that's true. So I think it was an interesting way to display work. I don't think I've seen anything like this before. It was an experiment. But I would really love to get feedback from everyone to see how they thought the work, how it was. To see all of the work together in this unreal and surreal space with the stars out, time changing the music. I think it's a really interesting idea. And I would love to hear what everyone thinks
Someone has a question in the chat. So they said, is the Mel Edwards, they said, is the vastness of the space around the exhibit meant to ground you like as you move towards it? And then maybe you could also talk about like your decision where when you actually use the keys, it's kind of slow when you're kind of approaching the space, but then like when you are in the space, it's like a bit faster when you're moving around.
Oh no, so to your second question, it's really because it's the same speed every time, but when you're in that vastness of space, like you said, it feels slow. And the idea is that you don't just come and see the work and leave, but you get to experience and be aware that everything's moving. You get to look at the building, and then it builds up that anticipation as you get into the space. So the pace remains the same all through in terms of the second question. And the first question, I think the idea was to have, maybe I should stop this. This music is...
Yeah, the music is a bit loud.
So for the first question, I think the idea was to have, there are two things involved. First of all, I do not know how to make virtual experiments. 2 months ago, I didn't know how to do any of this. So I had to learn all of this for this show. So building an ocean, firstly, was the easiest thing to do. That's one, because of time. Number two is, I think it goes with the narrative of having this protected space. There's only one place you can be in the whole experience, and it has to be in the sanctuary. So those were the two ideas behind making the space completely empty and then this one sanctuary.
So we have two questions. Should we leave them? Is it okay if we ask them like intermediately, or should we leave them all towards the end?
Yeah.
Sorry, what'd you say, Mahlet?
No, Dubem, go.
Yeah, I think towards the end, because of, like, I would really love to hear, Anik, Rajni, and Akon speak about the work too.
Okay, so we'll leave our questions till the end, but please like keep asking them, and we'll answer them all at the end.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much, Adudu. Probably Shaneela and Dubem can like reiterate how thankful we are because you learned all this, on the go, and there's so much intentionality and care put into everything, and like you just tell like each of the artist's work is like really put a lot of love into it. So yeah, immensely grateful because there's so many different comments. People are telling it's amazing and beautiful, which it is. So it's super great to hear, and it's great to hear like your thoughts around it too.
I just want to mention that I went under the water too. Did anybody do that too?
Oh no, I didn't do that.
Okay. Yeah, that's just by the way.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks again, Adudu. But now we'll go into conversation with the artists. Shaneela and Dubem will kind of pop in as we talk as well, but I'll be like your moderator, quote unquote. So first, if we can go around asking each of the artists to describe your practice and what made you drawn to being part of Sanctuaries. If you need me to repeat the question, let me know. But yeah, we can start with Rajni and then kind of go around from there.
Hi, everyone. Hi, guys. To get involved with this show was just like, all it took was like really quickly meeting Dubem and Mahlet and Shaneela, and I was like, yeah, this is fine. Like when I see collectives like that coming together with like a shared purpose, like very passionate and with like fresh ideas and like little bit, not reckless nature, but just risk takers, like I want to just like work with folks like you all day long. So it was really easy for me. I want to work with more collectives like Patterns. And if there's anyone right now watching and is in a collective that's anywhere close to Patterns, then like hit me up and I want to work with you too. But yeah, it was a shoe-in, and then yeah, I was just down for any, any kind of involvement. And like I was approached, I think way back when I think the idea was slightly different or something. There were like parts of it that have changed slightly. And like I'm down for all of it. And then the objects that I put into that show were that's the first time I've created like moving objects in a loop. do you want me to talk about my practice in this and like show some of the work, or do you want me to wait till it's now, right, when I do that?
Yeah, might
Okay.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just show you quickly the range of objects that inspired the work that is in this exhibition. So this is an extension of some works I made very long ago, and this is actually a series that like seems to be continuing, and I don't know why. And for me, they're based from these several renditions of female bodies that I was painting dancing. And that is a series called Dancers. Maybe I'll start by sharing that series, actually, not this one. Then I'll move into this positive form. So this is the Dancers series. And I started thinking about the body within science fiction, and particularly a dynamic of sort of a displaced person or a mutating and evolving human being, and how I can represent that using the aesthetic, or like, you know, using probably directly the aesthetic of science fiction to push that forward. And I thought of that. I went to Miami Basel one year and I saw these dancers, this dance company do this dance inside a vat of water. So they would start the dance and the vat starts filling and filling. They continue to dance, and like, of course, gravity leaves and like all these other factors leave. And it's almost like watching somebody dance in space or in a zero gravity chamber. And I was like, holy shit, this is so science fiction. I want to talk about the body in this way. There's something about the protuberances and the limbs and changing and morphing and remaking yourself when conditions like gravity and stuff are taken away then, right? So I started painting these bodies, and it became Dancer series. And then of course I started looking at tons of stills of choreography by different dance companies, mostly non-white owned and run, because they come from different canons of dance completely, right? It looks different. It's not stiff. It's not Eurocentric dance. Things changing and that. So this is the Dancer series, and you can see these like protuberances that are starting to like come off of the faces of the women, and the hands, the elbows looking a little funny. And this is actually, I think, because if you look at the rest of my work, mutation is really present in the work. And I think this is my first like little going in there. It's like, oh, this body's changing very quickly. So this is the Dancer series, and it kind of goes on. These are all done in acrylic wash on millboard. So these are the first two that I ever did after I saw that dance thing in Miami Basel in the water tank that I was talking about. So I did this one and I did this one. So they're both, I think this one's called Controller and the other one's called like Backbender or something like that. Anyway, they're all on millboard. They're all on the same stuff. So that's the first series. And then, yeah, right after that, I was like, okay, you know, let me just go right into making these objects, these science fiction objects that I was talking about. And I kind of started exploring just these protuberances and the shape of the cone and different sorts of shapes and forms that you can really readily access or understand in day-to-day life, but are used to actually explain this great variety of scientific and physical phenomena. So I really like the cone. I like anything that looks like a trajectory going through space. You know, you have a wake and a point of ballistic point and a wake. So I really like things like that. And I was just like, you know, discovering this series of objects, and I was hand turning them. I was working with a woodworker named Goliapis at the time, who very generously let me use his lathe, kept on letting me turn wood. So I turned these, and then of course, like the veins of the wood, or sorry, what's the word for that when you can see inside it? The grain of the wood, like very generously showed itself, and like I kind of used that in some of the work. I embellished with some fades, referencing horizons, and underlights and reflection in a place where there wasn't really any. So a slight use of like metallics and stuff. And this is the last object I'll show you. And this is one that I was, very happy to work with my friend Alex McLeod, who's like a fantastic and amazingly accomplished artist in his own right. But he helped me make these objects into things that are moving. So this is an object that you'll see in the exhibition that is rotating very, very slowly. I think it's a 20-second interval. And then in that 20 seconds, it goes together and it comes back apart and slowly, slowly turning. So getting to animate these sort of science fiction adventures that I'm having in a tactile way and like moving it into digital space for the first time. So that's why I like, that's why I want to work with collectives like this. They'll just let you do it. They'll be like, yeah, you've never done it, just do it, fine. It's like, wow, it doesn't happen, So I'm super honored to do that. And then Odudu just placed it in the space and I was like, oh, I want grass, and I want it to move. And he's like, whoa, okay, relax on all that. So what he did is like put all these beautiful, like, it looks like hair, these tendrils coming off the flower. So like if you change your gravity, you can actually walk up the petal and then you're kind of navigating it like sort of like a field of grass. And then you can go around these objects. I think you can go fully around 2 of them and partially around 1. So yeah, that's what I got to say about my work in Sanctuaries.
By the way, if I could just jump in for a little bit, I had to model every single strand.
Oh, you had to model each one, yeah.
But it was interesting, and I feel like, when Rajni said she just drew this sketch of like hair and this.
Yeah, man, I just did it in charcoal. I was like, just like this. Don't you understand?
And I'm like, okay. She's like, well, and the hair could like move, and I'm like, Rajni. Okay.
I did like this, and he was like, get off my screen, get out of my screen.
But I think it was interesting to test out, and which is one thing I really liked about the show, because I feel like all of the artists had very abstract ideas, and it was interesting, like trying to execute them. Because I'm not an animator, and I not unfortunately, but I'm an architect by trade, architectural designer, and we think about things very logically and structurally, and it's like, Anik is saying she wants her work to feel like dew, and then Rajni is drawing hair, and I'm like, whoa. This is
we're like, just do it, Odudu, get it done.
So it was interesting to just see how everything worked, and I just want to give a big shout out again to Alex, because he did a lot. He helped me, because like I said, I didn't know the 2 softwares I used were Rhinoceros and Unreal Engine, and he was the one that like put me through a lot of the things with Unreal Engine, and he helped us build her space. Oops. So yes, 100%. Fantastic work from Alex.
Yeah, he's a G. He's kind of great.
Yeah, I wanted to like just mention that because it's interesting, because you're saying, Rajni, like you work collaboratively with Alex and working with everyone coming together, right? So it's like,
yeah, we all came. Yeah, because I have no knowledge. Like if I had more time or like more resources, I would have like done an apprenticeship. Like me and Odudu probably would have been sitting next to each other learning Unreal Engine, trying to come up with objects exactly the way we want it, but that's like a 1-year apprentice. Like that's real shit. It takes so long to master it. Yeah. Alex has been doing it for like, I think 10.5 years straight, or little under 15 years. So it's like that's better. And like he's very patient. I would just kind of like brought up my objects and I was just like, I want this to go like this, and he's like, oh, like this, and then it takes a couple tries, but we were sitting together coming up with these objects based on my ones that I've done hand turned and painted. It's completely different world.
Right. That's amazing. And it's funny because now Odudu's mentioning about Anik's work. I think that's a good way to segue into Anik's practice and what draw you to the show. But yeah, thank you, Rajni, for the amazing presentation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Honestly, my mind is blown from seeing the virtual space. I just want to say, I think Odudu, you're like incredibly talented and like definitely underrated, and you're not hyping yourself up as much as you should be, because working with you was amazing, and just like seeing the way that you worked with the ideas that we were thinking about, and even just the first slide or the second slide that you shared where you see all of our work together. I'd never seen our work like that, and then for me to see that, I was like, wow, there really are so many connections and underlying links between what we're doing. And it didn't look like that as individual artists. So yeah, that's just a really great experience to start off from the jump. So I did, and yeah, and much love to you all, Patterns, for all your work and for getting us together and for dreaming really big. During this time of like COVID and seeing so many online exhibitions and most people are using just gallery spaces, you guys are really thinking outside of the box and really pushing for us to think about new worlds. And I love that. That's so important for me, actually. Okay, so I can share, because my work in the flower and the gallery space is distorted and necessarily so let me close this. I wanted to think about, I wanted the work to not necessarily be two-dimensional within a 3D space. I wanted it to have some sort of dimensionality and some sort of volume to it. Initially, I was like, oh, Doodoo, can it like slowly just like seep down the pedal and the pedal starts to bend? He's like, no, we cannot do that. So they're stagnant, but it works just as well. You know, yeah, it's just funny when you're working with, when you don't have the skill set, you're like, magic, please. So yeah, so there are these dimensional globular kind of shapes intended to feel as though there could be possibly in motion, but also feel as though they're droplets of water. And I think I was thinking about this because I wanted the body to not, particularly they're self-portrait nudes, black and white nudes. So I wanted it to feel as though there was something that was like otherworldly happening to it, but not fractured. So we worked with the sphere because it felt like a shape that allowed for that sort of like gentleness, yet distortion to happen at the same time. So I'll just kind of show you some of the images that are in there because you can't see them otherwise, I guess. So I'll show you, I think, 4 I have here. Here's the first one. And this is a series that I developed. So a lot of my work is very like, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, typically going into the archives of Toronto and trying to uncover stories that we have never had contemporary access to, or think about trying to find answers to questions that I have been thinking about for a long time. And this series, when I started shooting this, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to deliberately be within my body and to document and to think about the performance of being in front of the camera and then learn from it afterwards and try to understand what it is this sequence of images is trying to say to me. So for me, it really became something, it's like a study on beauty, I would say, more than anything. And oftentimes when I show this work, people ask me like, you know, they immediately want to talk about the Black body and the absence of Black bodies within art history, and particularly the genre of the nude. And for me, that those tenets exist, but I also wanted space for the body to be just revered, to be thought about as beautiful, as gentle, as fragile, as strong, as all these different complexities in addition to being Black. So I started with, so that's sort of how I initially started thinking about it as it was produced. And then I realized that a lot of people, a lot of like exhibition spaces and like people who are interested in collecting my work or whatever are not necessarily coming from like, you know, Black communities. They're not necessarily connecting to some of the ideas that I wanted to come out of the work and some of the conversations that I wanted to have with the work. And so for me, I felt like I wanted to protect it in a way that it could always sort of have a type of armor that, I don't know, I guess in a way like shielded all of the softness and all the other things that I'm thinking about with this particular piece. And so I called it darky. And so for me, darky is like a term that I think a lot of people, you know, growing up, I'm Caribbean. And so there are people who will use that term as that word as a term of endearment. Like you'll just walk on the street, people call you darky and you're just supposed to be like, hi. But it's also, I would say that in a North American context, and particularly for me growing up as like a dark-skinned Black girl, it's also a term that was thrust on me as like a racial epithet. And, along with all these other types of negative words that were also thrown at me as a child. And so in a way, there's a bit of reclaiming that word, but there's also a bit of recognizing that offering this as a title to this piece protects it in a certain way, in a way that only that piece has agency, and that it cannot be, it's almost, for me, it's like a type of armor that prevents the violence of that type of language to be able to penetrate, because it itself already owns it. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a whole way of thinking about it. So yeah, I'd love to chat later on and talk through any questions y'all have about it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anik, because it's interesting because you're saying like how oftentimes people will put their own notions or their own like ideas around your work, right? You're trying to flip it on its head and be like, no, this is how my work is being viewed and this is how I'll allow it, right? It's like giving like only certain access to certain people, or just saying like, this is what it is and that's it. There's no other question of like, oh, this is about the Black body. It's like the body is more than just Black, because yeah, you're saying it's like gentle and kind and caring and like fragile. And I think that's super interesting in contrast with Rajni's work and Akum's work as well, where it's like about the body, but so much more than just like, what our racialized bodies are, because I think it's people want to be like, oh, this racialized body, but it's like, no, like we actually have feelings and thoughts,
That's something that typically happens where we're reduced to just being one particular thing. And particularly now during the time of like after the murder of George Floyd, and just in all the things that are happening in the world right now, Black people of color are constantly being asked to be, to speak specifically and singularly to that part of their identity. And all the intersections get distorted and evaded. And for me, I refuse that, because I think that's part of the project that's constantly trying to make us only one thing and only useful for a certain type of knowledge. And I think a lot of the work that all of us are doing, and the way that Odudu even put it together, allows for that sort of like removal of that singularity and forces you to think about things in a complicated way, particularly because we're in an environment that is foreign to everyone. That space that he's created, no one owns. It's not a colonial space, and therefore our bodies can allow to be, and the objects that we made and everything can allow to be as free as we want it to be.
Yeah, because even the space, it's a flower, but there's this vastness, right? There's just nothing there. So it's like you can think beyond just the space itself. But thank you so much for that. Oh, Shaneela, go ahead.
It's also super interesting how Odudu like totally picked up on those things, and when he was like constructing the space as well, like those themes that you were talking about. But
yeah, he's brilliant, guys, just so you know.
We'll hype him up during the entire talk, like every 5 minutes. Like Odudu's amazing. Yeah. Okay, next. But yeah, we'll move on to Akum, and then move on to, actually, one of the questions is talking about your relationship with Odudu and how you're able to come up the space. But before we go into all that, we'll talk to Akum about her practice and what made you drawn to this project.
So I first heard about the project from Dubem. Like we met over the holidays last year, and he was telling me about like the show. So I thought it was really interesting that he brought up the title as Sanctuaries. And for me, in many ways, I felt like that was open to self-interpretation, and also considering like my work and how I'm pointing to Nigeria, my home country, for inspiration with my work, and how like culture, like some cultural and religious practices often give you this promise of like safety and sanctuary, and with like a reward at the end of it. So I thought it was really interesting, like with the name. So for me, like putting my work in this show was really interesting because it kind of spoke to that, like how like these cultural and religious practices often promise you like some form of safety, but in a way also restrict and confine you. And it's not like totally safe. So it's really interesting. Like even when I spoke with Odudu, like about how I wanted like the work to show in these like cases. So it's like me like expressing myself and even learning to understand my body better and who I am as like a woman. But then I just think of it in the like cultural and religious aspect of how like it gives you that promise, but at the same time, like you're confined to your own space and there's this lack of expression. So that was kind of my idea with him, and going through like having them placed in these resin cases. So it was like this idea of like confinement, but at the same time wanting to break through from that. So that was something like I really liked discussing with him. I'll just share some of the images I have for the show, because I don't think they were very visible. One second. So for most of the images, there's text. I was reading this book before I started working on some of the images, because some of them were like really newer works that I'd been working on previously from 2019. And it was really interesting that there's this book. It's like an excerpt from a story called "The Girls Who Fainted at the Sight of an Egg." So it's really interesting. It's about this home where girls would go to during like their early stages of puberty. And then there's this grandmother who tells you, like she has this sense, like sixth sense, where like if you're walking through the door and a cobweb like stuck to your skin, it means like you are promiscuous. So it's really interesting. Like these girls didn't know much about themselves. And this text really stuck out to me because it kind of spoke to things that I'm currently looking at. So it goes, you reach for warm eggs laid by chickens, and you think of mysterious regions that produced eggs, of what it is like for a chicken to pass an egg, and what it is an effort that makes them so irate. You do not hold and feel consoled by its khaki blandness. You do not tear up with longing at the sight of eggs. Even when your wedding night comes and goes, and you have permission to fondle and be fondled, the sense of shame will remain ingrained. You will wonder about the shape of things, the discrepancy between that which is oval and that which is long and tube-like. You will think of wages of sin. By then, of course, you will understand that there is no such thing as Bluetooth pregnancy, and you will feel both ashamed at your own foolishness and angry that you allowed yourself that degree of ingenuousness. When you're bearing your children, you will wonder if it is a good or bad thing. You wonder if perhaps that it is why chickens are so foolish and confused, too much coming and going, too little understanding of reasons why. You will sleep and imagine yourself turning into a large chicken, but you won't tell anyone because of the shame. So most of my work, like why this was interesting to me is because most of my work deals with like female sexuality and how like culture and religion in some way kind of restricts that. And in the end, like you are almost shamed for expressing desire or expressing who you are. And I think with that context for me, my work is very personal and almost like a diary. So I see drawing as this immediate way of like talking to myself and learning more about myself, questioning what it is to be a woman, also questioning functions of my body, and even these constructs of like how women are always subjected to the role of like just getting married or childbirth. So it's like, these are things like I constantly am searching, reading through and learning about myself. So it was really interesting, like with the name Sanctuaries, I thought it was really open to give like your own interpretation to it. And I think like with Rajni and Anik's works, like that was really interesting to see how their interpretation of that was as well. Yeah.
Thanks so much for, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I thought that was the last one. Yeah, that's the last image.
Cool. Yeah, you said a lot of different things, so my brain's like all the different things you're mentioning. But it's really beautiful because you're thinking about the word sanctuary, right? And like the title of the show and how that was able to resonate with you so much. And I feel like also too, like you're mentioning how the work you're doing is not only just you as an artist, but it's like almost life work, right? You're like discovering things by yourself. You're like constantly growing, but also at the same time as a person, but your art practice is also growing with the way you experience things about your body and how you're able to think differently, right? Has that been always something, or just something that came out in this work specifically? I'm asking questions now. And then I'll ask Chukwudubem and Shaneela to kind of have their takes around the title Sanctuaries, because that's a key question I feel like to ask ourselves.
I think for me, like when I think about it, like because originally, like I was in architecture school, and something that was almost immediate was like drawing and as a form of writing almost. So I think with even like the work I'm doing right now, it's almost like keeping this diary. So that's why I always say like it's almost autobiographical in its own way. So for me, it's almost like exploring myself, even like from my background growing up in northern Nigeria, and how girls were thought to be a certain way, even like notions of beauty. And so for me, it's like all the way of like going through those things and learning. And I think with the work, like with Sanctuaries, like it was really interesting for me, like it's to be this safe space, but at the same time, I think about it in a religious and cultural context coming from where I'm from, how like those two things promise sanctuary, but then not really at the same time. It gives you like this confinement and often silences you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, because it's like it's like a trap. It's like you're actually in a safe place, but not at the same time, right? And
Yeah.
it ends. But I wanted to ask a quick question to the three of us. I realized I don't think we've ever explained why Sanctuaries is the title of the show, and then we can go into the next question about each artist in terms of working with Odudu in that experience. But if Shaneela and Chukwudubem want to add like a little blurb about why Sanctuaries.
Do you want to go first, Shaneela?
Well, I guess I can just kind of say that it was kind of like a working title, like at the beginning, and we were like, we wanted to change it. It was just like a working title, but then we kept developing the show, and we were like, this is actually the perfect title. But like, I just thought, for me personally, I just thought that it fit really well, because it was like we're creating like a new space, like a safe space for these works and these women's bodies to exist within, and like that is like protected from like the horrors, I don't know, like terrors of the colonial world. And yeah,
that's so beautifully put. And I think while thinking about the show, we're thinking about creating new ways of thinking. I think that's the main starting point. New ways of thinking or addressing the body, and acknowledging that like our regular ways of thinking are really controlled by particular things. For example, capitalism, colonialism, and particular other constructs. So we wanted to approach this subject of the body in as a form of like to try to create conversations around the body that is outside these constructs. So hence the gallery space, and it's kind of like all made up. But I really like how this work kind of make conversations with themselves too within this space, and how broad it is, and the fact that like these artists all have like different backgrounds. We all live in Canada, but it's like this, like all the artists have like hyphenated background. You have like Rajni, who is Sri Lankan Canadian, and Anik, who is Trinidadian Canadian, and Akum is a Nigerian Canadian. To have like a very, very expansive discussion on the body that is not just kind of locked to what we I don't know. I think Sanctuaries for me was about the space, not just for the space of the bodies to exist, but a safe space to talk, a safe space for conversation on the body, and reimagining what the body is, and the politics around the body. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I haven't been able to do this yet, but I want to be like with next to someone while they go through the space and like just hear their thoughts and like all like their inner workings of what they're thinking while they're seeing this work. Cause since like, you know, and have a conversation with them, right? So like we're having the works in conversation and be there with someone to be like, oh, what are you thinking? Does it scare you that these are not within the 4 white walls? Does it confuse you? Like all different things, right? When we're telling people about the show and like telling family and friends, they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean it's not gonna be in 4 white walls? That makes no sense. But it's like thinking beyond that, right? And like thinking, ooh, sorry, I had to drop out for a second. Okay, and then just thinking beyond that. But the next question is maybe more in depth is like, what was it like to work with Odudu and be able to put your works into a virtual space? Because for all of you, I think it is your first time putting your works in this type of space. So we can start with Anik and then go to Akun.
I think I already went off a little bit on this.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, sorry so much. But if you want anything else to add in things that maybe like, yeah, you questioned or like, oh, what? How is that possible?
Well, I think part of it is like the process that Odudu took us on. I was really struck by the gathering of all our work for us to see actually to begin with, see how where they connect and the underlying themes, and then also where it was taken from that. So finding some key words that connected to the work and then looking to nature, like all those things really struck me. And it had me thinking even more creatively about, well, what could I possibly do with this work that I have as a photographer who works in like a 2-dimensional plane? How can I think about it differently? What types of shapes and motions and, you know, even like emotions does this space call for? And so actually when we first started, we were asked to send in images that kind of speak to the types of structural environments or domestic spaces or whatever sort of like environments we could imagine our work living in. And I initially sent a whole bunch of bedrooms, particularly of like 90s sort of, or like high school, like young Black kids, like bedrooms that are filled with newspaper prints from like Essence or whatever types of magazines people were reading, just like walls covered with images that are reflecting oneself. And so there's that space. And then the second space that I was also thinking a lot about was these like, sort of the, like a construction hoarding, but like in like a community, like not necessarily in a downtown core, but like more in like the suburbs. I guess I was thinking a lot about Scarborough too, and like areas that are considered to be like areas of refuse in a lot of like larger like planning, like city planning kind of conversations. And I was thinking about those two spaces as types of sanctuaries, and particularly like the hood as a sanctuary. I think that's actually what I said to Dudu. I was like, I want the feeling of like the hood being the sanctuary. And and that's not how it ended up, but that's where it started, right? Like I was really thinking about places that people see as like, and I'm saying people who do not live in those communities see as however it's seen, however it's spoken about through the media, and what it actually is like living in those spaces. So I think, I mean, this idea like of the flower and thinking about those types of communities, for me, it connects because when you think about those like communities, like it's oftentimes spaces that you don't have access to unless you're there, unless you live in the community, and you see it as that place that's loving, that is safe in many ways. When you know, like when you've like grown up in the community, you see it as a place that you know intimately. There's just so many things that are there that don't get taken up when you're not living in the community or from the community or wanting to show love to it. And I was really interested in those types of spaces. So, I mean, it's interesting to see where we've evolved and and what it ended up looking like now. But that's where I started out.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting too, like how he like got everyone's ideas together, and even like, because usually most times like when you're in a show, it's just like you just know it's like the 4 white walls. So when like even when I spoke with Shaneela, Mahlet, and Dubem about like what I wanted my space to be like, I just like I wasn't thinking in terms of how like it's evolved to now. I was just thinking of like just images like in a space, but not in this way. So it was really interesting like how it evolved in this way, and even like talking with Odudu and coming up with the idea of like that confinement, like offering like a sanctuary, and how like seeing how he translated that idea of like the resting shape. So I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's very obvious that Akum went to architecture school, because her space is much different from Anik and Raj.
Yeah.
It has this
Like
architecture.
structural.
But yeah, it was, for me, it was really, and I absolutely loved it, because sometimes with architecture, you tend to think very, very practically, and I think having artists, it just helped me think about things I would never think about. Like when Akun sent me some of her precedents, I was like, what is all this stuff? But I liked it. It was interesting, and it challenged me to kind of think of how I can take this and make it feel real. Because one thing about my work is that I don't want it to feel too fantastical, like, for you to forget that this can be real. I think that's very important to make sure that it feels like this thing could exist tomorrow outside in any city, So yeah, it was, for me, it was amazing working with everyone. And if, in case no one has noticed, Anik's pedal is actually black. It's not pink. So if you go the other way, I know the way the camera is set when you come in is you come in from this angle, but if you go around, Anik's pedal is different. It's almost like as if the pedal is kind of dying, which is interesting.
Sorry, Anik, you're on mute.
Yeah, well, actually, it reminds me, like, what Anik said about like the hood sanctuary, or the hood, like, and like I just thought of this song now, A Rose in Harlem, and how like things that places where people don't really pay attention to, where like the best things come from. I was talking to somebody the other day, and this was when I was in BC, and I was like, the best artists come from Scarborough. The best artists in Canada come from all my favorite artists right now. Like lots of them are like from Scarborough, and I really enjoyed how you talked about that, earlier.
That is 100% accurate.
That is true.
Right, Raji?
Raji's on mute. She doesn't know she's on mute.
Yeah, no, Rajni was leaving the museum.
I'm not. I agree with Tariq and all of you that Scarborough is the best incubator for artists in the world.
Okay.
Actually, we had asked the question before you left, what was it like to work with Odudu, which I feel like you touched on as well, as Anik was saying, she touched on as well, but she kind of expanded it, same as Akum. Like, what was it? What was it like?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I enjoyed just meeting and interacting with him because he's quite a personable young man. But I just wish that I had more time, and then we had more time to really flesh. And I'm sure he feels the same. It's like, this is a whole skill set that like you need to actually go to school for like a couple years, or sit under somebody who's a pro and do it that way. But like with the time that was there, and like for the ideas that I had, like I can't believe that it came together. They're moving on a pedal with tendrils around it. You can change gravity and walk up the pedal, and it's like he got it done, everything that I want. And that's wild. That's really crazy. So it was great. And I've never worked with an architect before to create an intangible space. So it's quite an experience. I hope that I can do it again at some point.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Odudu. You're the best. Rock and roll for life. Yeah, man.
No, you guys are the best. I think working with all of you was completely fantastic. I think it brought something to my work, because I'm an architectural designer. I'm not officially an architect yet, just to put that out there. But
oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. But I think, I feel like even though I'm an architect, I studied architecture. I'm an artist by heart, so like working with artists for me is fantastic. I just love thinking about abstract ideas and help, because I've realized that a lot of people who went to art school, you know, it's like they're so creative and so a lot of things are so abstract, but then I think what's missing is putting it in like a 3-dimensional way. And I think everything, once your work kind of gets into 3 dimensions, it starts to become a lot more powerful. So I think that's where I love collaborating with artists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's wonderful the way we all worked. You know, normally when you're in group shows, they just put your work in a space. Like for solo shows, it's more specific. You can say, "Oh, let me do this and do that." But in group shows, like they just kind of throw your work up in their space. So it was very, very beautiful for this collaboration to occur. I think it's something new, it's a new way of working and thinking of, like, you know, everybody's petal is kind of you know, specific to what the artists want, and there's this just very intimate collaborative work. And also the space itself, like I was thinking, like Partners Collective are able to, you know, curate this, and, you know, and we're able to do all this. And like thinking about the internet as somewhere like, oh, this virtual space, the power that is in this, we have in this virtual spaces is also very incredible. And I was thinking, like, that space where the works are right now, if we're to like, if we didn't have that space, it will, like, we'll have to spend like millions and millions of dollars to create that and put works in it. So, but it's amazing that we can do that virtually and exist as, you know, in this space. And it's interesting to think about, you know, the virtual spaces right now as an amazing location where we can exist and do things outside the norm. Where it's like you have to, I don't even understand what I'm trying to say. It's like,
No, of course, 100%. I agree. And yeah, in today's age, you could build anything and make anything with the internet. It's absolutely fantastic. And I wanted to also give a big shout out to Patterns Collective for putting the pieces of this show together. I think when Dubem approached me, when did we have that first conversation? I think it was in April or something. Very early in the year, and he was telling me about the idea. And then when they sent me the email and the title was Sanctuaries, I just fell in love with the idea. So just a big shout out to Patterns Collective for picking, you know, amazing people to be on the show.
Thanks so much. Because it's funny to think about it, because when we first were asked about this, there was a possibility of like the option of doing it in person, and it was so weird because of COVID and stuff, right? And I think it's almost like a blessing disguise that we didn't do it in person, because all of the different things are happening, right? And like I'm thinking now, I'm like, if it existed in person, how would that change, right? How would we be able to make that world building aspect? I think that wouldn't be achieved, right? It has to this space only has to exist online, and like that's only what it is to do it as. And also there's a comment, would you just go back to like, I'm not an architect. Someone said, you are an architect.
I saw that too.
I'm like, I need to point that out right now. Someone reaffirmed it for you, validated you're an architect. That's it. But yeah, the next question we're just thinking about in relation, we can also start with Rajni, but in relation to the body and the gaze, how do you feel like your work exemplifies that and goes outside the gaze? So thinking about like the male gaze, like the white gaze, or heteronormative gaze, and like, how does your work out of that?
Yeah. I really love something that Anik said, which is like kind of being, when you're an artist of color and you're a woman, you're kind of always being called upon to be an artist of color and a woman. And it's kind of like, I really like exploring what the body means. And like, that can be something that becomes, for me, really psychedelic and really detached from the idea of demonstrating identity. And in a lot of cases, the exploration of the body and the way that it operates, like politically and personally, interpersonally, and within society, it's like the colored female body is inextricably linked to like the white gaze and the male gaze, like continuously. And I'm just like, I I don't want to work inside that anymore. It's going to work inside that anyway because of who I am until this shit is over and we take the settler white colonial project and we like shake it by its neck and kill it. But it's like, until then, I don't know when it will stop. My work will stop being linked to that. I really wanted to stop being linked to that at all times because I have more agency than operating under that pressure. And when I say pressure, it's not like an active pressure. It's like a very passive, like dull pressure that's being expected of the work and what it does when I put it out at all times. Hey man, I'm kind of like a sci-fi nerd who like grew up watching YouTube documentaries about airbrushing. Like I don't really know, you know, I don't know. So when, you know, if your question was like about my work in the show as linked to the white gaze and the male gaze, right?
How does it go outside of those things? They're not necessarily linked to it. Like it just kind of,
yeah, I'm trying to not be, also not even be identified as operating in a relationship with those things. It's going to happen anyway, like as a person who is a woman and who is not only like a person of color, but also like who has grown up in poverty and stuff like that. Like that's always going to be linked to my personhood. But as an artist, in terms of the work that I put out, I need it to be linked to like so many more ideas than that. Like as out of necessity. So yeah, I hope that answers the question like probably a really strange way.
No, I think it's perfect because like I think that's what me and Dubem and Shaneela were all thinking about. It's like I think we kind of talked about it before in this sense, just like, and actually Anik talked about it, is like those placements onto people, right? Onto like women or like racialized people or Black folks or Indigenous folks or whoever you are. It's like those things are placed onto you, right? So how do we go outside of those things and kind of like combat those things and say, no, we don't want to actually talk, like not talking about the male gaze really, but how does your work go out? Like just be like far away as possible, like 10, 100 miles away from it, right?
Yeah. Like, you know, I'm doing a lot more work now, like for my programming coming up in the next year or 2 years, in linking my work with like the STEM or STEAM communities that are around any of the galleries or museums or like university galleries that I show in. Like if they have a program, I'm doing the Kerner residency. I don't know if you know, but it's at Queen's University. They get an artist in 2 weeks out of the year. And I was just like, oh, so for my talk, so they pay you this money and they're just like, oh, do a talk. I'm like, okay, like, I know you guys are a big science university. Like, what's your engineering department program saying? Like, is there anyone who's a person of color, who's doing good research, who's doing something interesting about climate change? And like, you know, is there somebody who's working with Indigenous communities, confirming like scientific findings and furthering land back and like Indigenous re-sovereignty, like that sort of stuff? I'm just like, let me try to like link my work to like these productive ass ideas that can actually move us forward rather than like being stuck in this lurch and I think for the most part it's like perpetuated by like white settler ideology within institutions. They want to really keep us there, whereas our work can do like much greater things and like be more beneficial instead of being stuck in this stupid response to a box all the time.
Yeah, because who is your work benefiting, right? Who is it for? I guess. That's what it really is.
yeah, and it's all this like, oh, underrepresentation, misrepresenting porn. Like it's just like that keeps on going. It's like you're here because it's a representation. It's just like, dude, I do not care about those things. Like my work it's gotta like, we have to get past that and talk about like the flesh of the work now, and who wants to kind of do that with me. So
yeah, beautifully put, I think, and just like very honest. Because it is true. I think a lot of people are thinking about it but don't say it because like, well, that's not gonna. They don't want to hear that, right? That's the thing. They want to hear all the typical buzzwords. But I'm curious to hear Akuman and Anik's also thoughts around those. Yeah, like how does your work go outside of that? But also like flip it on its head and completely just like shake up what their idea is. of UR, I guess. Yeah.
But we are already doing that. People need to start seeing the work for the layers of complexity that's in it, instead of just trying to find that answer to that singular question around like, is it like, you know, oppression and identity, like the complexity of how our identity functions within the world connects to way more than just the selfhood, right? There's so much connected to the relationships to the land, relationships to other communities, relationships to sky world, relationships to archives, relationships to spoken, unspoken histories, bodies. Like there's just so many interesting things that we could be talking about, like when it comes to how our work is read. And for me, I just find that constantly being asked to, like, for example, in response to like the work on Darky, whenever I show it, first thing is about like, oh, Blackness and identity and underrepresentation. Like, I'm like, what else do you see in there? Like, do you see curvatures? Do you see lighting choices? Do you see like, you know, do you see technique? Like, what other types of things can we talk about that's removed from that? Because it's made us have to become experts on things that we don't actually want to be studying all the time. We don't always want to be talking about all the time. Like my work right now is—
That's such a nice way to put it.
I'm like 100% moving towards very overtly doing work around the environment, climate, relationships between governance structures, the ways in which communities have always been thinking about this before it became something that's spoken about in a very particular way. I'm really interested in those types of stories that have long been being told and what that looks like now. But I see that even as I do that in my work and I start to talk about that, people want to reduce me and bring me back to this like corner of like, yeah, but what about being Black? Like, you know, it's like, let me live. And I think that what that does is that it continues to force me to respond to somebody who has refused to see and refused to acknowledge my personhood, my selfhood, the complexities of all that I am. And I don't want to continue to be responding to that. I want to respond through that and beyond that and talk to those who are already connecting to what it is that I'm doing. And I think when you do that, your language becomes encoded because nobody else can understand what you're saying because they're looking for you to say, I'm struggling, I'm this, I'm that, these really singular narratives, right? And I think that there are places that have always been doing that, right? Like when we think about hip hop is laden with codes, with messages, and it's speaking straight through and directly to a particular audience. When it, like, I'm talking about proper hip hop. We're not talking about like, you know, it's talking straight through to a particular audience, right? Which is why we have websites like Lyric Genius that's like trying to decode it and decipher what it is that people are saying, but they're not talking to you. And I think it's the same thing with a lot of our work. If you don't get it, like either do the actual, put in the struggle to try to understand all the layers of what this might mean, or recognize perhaps it's not, the message in the work isn't talking directly to you. So there's just so many things. Like, I'm just like, and that's also like, I'm in school right now and I came back to school specifically because I'm like, I'm done with like just answering those like same old questions around like, you know, how hard's the struggle? It's like real hard. And let's moving.
Yeah, no, I think that's so well put because of like, you know, it reduces the work. The work is so much, like it's loaded and it reduces the work to a very, very linear, like, you know, point. And also talking about the work in those terms centers the white gaze, you know, in a way. So yeah, Akum.
Yeah, I just feel like for me, it was like, it's really interesting what both Rajni and Anik said, because like, even like, I feel it's only when I moved here that it almost became more obvious. Like, it's like a topic of discussion, like bringing up like, oh, you're Black, why are you not talking about this and that? Because I don't know, coming from back home, maybe it's because like everyone almost look like the same. It's not something you talk about or something like you're like pressured to think about. So it's only like stepping outside of that it only became like a thing that I was almost aware of, because I've never, like, when I'm working, like, it's not something that's in my mind. I'm not thinking about, oh, I'm creating work because, oh, it's like the Black body, or it's like it's just, my work is just about myself and like learning about myself. It's almost like a diary for me and a way of writing. So I've never thought about it in the context of like the gays or anything like that. And I feel, like I said, it's when I came here that it became like really prominent, like seeing a Black person and, oh, you're Black, and like actually pointing out that to you. For me, I just see myself as like a person, and that's what I want to talk about, like just myself, not in that context.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I think about, like, for myself, like, I'm born here, I think about my friends, who come from different places, right? And everyone around you is Black. So you're like, what's the big issue? Like, we're all look like each other, right? But then there's issues of like classism or poverty or like sexism, right? Which kind of directly talk about your work in terms of misogyny or other things, right? And like womanhood. So it's very different compared to like Raj and Anik, where when you grow up in Canada or so-called Canada, you're always placing those things and you're kind of very aware of it. But then when you come here, it's like, oh, this is what it is, because people are going to place things on you whether you like it or not. And it's like a learned thing where it's like, here it's like almost like the norm. It's like, of course someone's gonna label you as like a Black woman artist, not just a Kumaduka who does, what are like, yeah. But I don't know, Dubem or Shaneela, want to add any comments? I see the mic around.
No, I really love, like, all the artists to add just little things to, like I want writing to talk about the otherworldly and, imagine worlds and realities and the hope that comes with that. And I love Annie to talk about, form and colors, sensuality and other stuff that are in her work that she's not spoken about yet, if not. And Akum talk about, her work, you can also talk about like, technique and the way you put things together, like if there's any other thing that's left. Yeah.
I just really love how all the artists' answers were really similar to like discussions that like we've had as a group, like the three of us, and where we've been like, yeah, we don't like, we want to get through those things. Like we just want to be known as like a really cool like art collective, not as like
no. Yeah, you guys really did it. You guys really did it though by asking the right questions. Because like in artist talks, I'm so used to personally like the same stale ass questions. It's always like it gets really, really stale out there, and it's within, like we just talked about it, like the questions of underrepresentation and oppression and all that stuff. That's all imposed by like a white settler. Like it's a colonial ideology, and it centers the white gaze again and again and again. It centers white power again and again and again. So it's like it takes a collective of folks outside of that to ask the right questions and like move it, like keep it moving. Let's move it past that. We don't want to keep staring at that bad car accident. That's horrible. We need to fix it and we'll move.
Exactly. Also love how you're just relaxing on the grass.
Yeah,
I'm smoking off camera because smoking's not good. Like it's not healthy. Right? So I put myself in a semi like a passively seductive position. Is relaxing.
No, it's all good. Relax.
I've had a really long install here. Like I'm pretty.
You at the National Gallery?
Yeah, I'm at the National Gallery.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go through some of the questions. I feel like a lot of people have asked a lot of questions.
Wait, before we go into question periods, we have like 3 minutes. I know because Dubem asked that question, and I wanted to tie into another question, maybe if it's possible for whoever wants to answer. It's like, how does your work or like your mediums tie maybe into like the virtual space? Is that a good question, Dubem? Is that like tying to the question you asked before, like other worlds, or like, Aniko was saying about like, communities and stuff like that? How does that fit into like a virtual space? And then we can get into the Q&A, because there's a bunch of questions. People are really excited, which is really fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want me? Is it okay if I start?
Yeah.
Was that for the artists? I don't.
Yes, that's for the artists. That's for you.
Okay. Yeah. I made my work in wood, right? And the first stuff was painted. I'm someone who always works with my hand. If you look at my hands, they're like super crusty and like they're really beat up. But like I work with my hands all day. So it was really crazy to sit down and emulate the textures and the naturalism that somehow fits into my particular brand of science fiction that I like to make. Like it's almost like sci-fi naturalism, and I like to mirror like the micro and the macro and those things. Like when you look at wood grain, it looks like the surface of a planet. So like these are things that happen like in terms of the materiality changing. This is stuff that's like very intriguing to move into the virtual space. Like it's super cool. And there's even stuff I found out that there's software programs called like shaders, I think it's what it's called. And you can like mathematically algorithmically replicate the irregularity that would be present in water or wood grain or sand or things that are naturally occurring in our universe. You can algorithmically replicate those things in like an animated loop even, or something that's not a loop and it generates forever. So like in doing some of the research to come up with just kind of what would look like simple objects, like you guys push to move my work into virtual space actually opened a lot of doors for me and made me think about this crossover of materiality and the way that works.
Thanks so much, Rajni. Anik has to leave like right now. So there was one comment for you that was very, very sweet and kind. So quickly, Shaneela, say to Anik and then we'll...
I really want to say it because my parents are also from Trinidad. This person is Trini. So it's like a Trinity is happening. Anyways, this person said, being able to move around the objects makes it more personal than having to stare at the pieces on the wall. To be able to move all around gave freedom that you usually don't find in the real world. And as the only one in the space, it does give you that feel of sanctuary. And as a Trinidadian transplant, Anik's words about not being one thing resonates a lot.
Oh, nice. Thank you for that comment. And thank you all for having us and for working on this for so long and for so hard and for so intentionally. I really appreciate being part of the work.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming, Anik.
Thank you so much, Anik.
It's amazing being part of this group together. How long's the show on till again?
December.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, a lot of time.
All right, take care, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
And now we'll move into the Q&A period because there's a bunch of questions. People have like a lot of questions around like the space for Odudu, for all the artists, for us as well. So Shaneela, take it away.
Okay, so we answered a couple of the other questions. So there's two kind of things right here that are both kind of related. So this person, Tricia, sorry if I'm not saying that properly. I love to know, they said, I love to know how curators / artists chose the musical accompaniment to the exhibition space. It immediately galvanized the viewer to become grounded and safe when approaching the destination. Thank you for this incredibly innovative and intellectual show. And then Rajni also asked, how did you make the choice of the music?
That song is called Escaping Time by Benjamin Martins. I listen to this album all the time just because it allows me to focus when I'm working. And I've repeated that song so many times. So I was like, it's perfect for the show because when you come in, you want to be focused. You want to pay attention, to the work that's in front of you. It has that vibe to it. So I tried it on and it just went exactly with the pace of the sky and the whole feeling and the sound of the water. And I was like, oh, it's perfect. And then I sent it to them and I asked them to check it out. And they were like, yeah, it sounds great. We just went with it.
That's really cool because it feels really personal because it's like, oh, you were kind of listening to this while you were working on it. And then you were like, oh, that's actually perfect. But anyways, there's, okay. So there's actually a really interesting question here that I was really curious about the answers. And I thought that Rajni could probably answer this really interestingly because it kind of reminded me of her Traveler series. So this question, it says, okay, I'm out of questions. This is from Ren. But I hope this comment leads somewhere, but it's really dope to have a 3D/digital space one moves through, because it reminds instantly of digital avatars and created worlds that are kind of free of the limits of real world. Do you see the pieces you've created as sort of avatars then, in the sense that they represent you in this virtual space?
For this particular exhibition?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know how directly representational the work is for this exhibition. It's more of an exploration of body dynamic, exploring science fiction aesthetics, and some physics ideas. So I don't know about how much I can see myself in represented within this exhibition, but like in my own work, and if you want me to connect it to the Traveler series, in my own work, for sure, like it is a optimistic reflection of another dimension or another time where immigrants are surviving and thriving in a world, in a fully displaced human population planet. So this is a time past borders, right? And in that way, yeah, I mean, yeah, the concept of the avatar within this question becomes psychological, I think, a little bit. So it's like if you want to look into the psychology of the Traveler series particularly, and like the avatar as like a representation of that is a utopian, or someone who is having a better time than maybe you are in this world, and you're trying to make a better place. I don't quite know about that, because in Traveler series, we're going past a dystopic time to something that is, oh my God, my phone is, a lot of people are, sorry. Something that's it's a different timeline, but you go through like intense hardship in the beginning of it. And by that, within the Traveler series, it would be the fall of white supremacy and white colonies, specifically, right? So I don't know. In terms of the concept of the avatar itself as being a direct representation that's utopian of myself, or like improved or facing less obstacles in any way, I don't really know about that. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very interesting question. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering that.
Answering it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I really like the open-endedness of the answer, because of the work itself is open-ended too, and it's kind of open for thinking, you know. So I was thinking about it, it's like, you know, there's just a lot of like possibilities. Is this like, you know, a spaceship, or, you know, it's like there are different things that come to your head. But your work is amazing, Rajni, and the way you would think about.
That's so kind.
Yeah,
okay.
And I actually really love your newest show, I think, that just came out, Into the Realm of Lightning. And I was
in
like,
the realm of lightning.
Yeah, in the realm of lightning. Yeah. And I was like, just kind of thinking about how you're really building like this universe. Like, I'm like, these are all like different kind of characters that are like existing in this space. And I actually got the book that you made for that. And like,
that was a show together with another amazing artist named Nepsidhu. So that was pretty much a fully collaborative show. And in this case, for that show, it's so funny, right? Like, world building is a practice that you can't shake once you start making it. You got to keep going. And in this case, it's definitely like synthesizing a kind of a new spiritual aesthetic, or like trying to synthesize a spiritual ideology, taking from the poetic works of Sun Ra, like just his stuff about freedom, his like very Buddhist. If you start reading his poetry, and especially if you get in like right in the thick of like the collated works, Immeasurable Equation, it gets very Buddhist. It goes into like amazing ideas of micro and macro. Like, he touches on physics, he touches on social dynamics together with like science and science fiction itself. Like, he has such a wild and beautiful way of talking about the world, and especially about the things that we don't know about ourselves and about the universe that we occupy. So generous of the universe to let us still be alive. But it's just like, you know, he had this way. So like taking from that and Buddhism, and Nep is Sikh, so Sikhi, and the way that all kind of rumbled together into something that was so architectural in a funny kind of fluid way. I'm really glad that you enjoyed that show, and we really enjoyed making it for sure. It was a long produced show. That one went on for a while making that.
Yes.
Yeah, I love how that book really felt like it existed within that universe that you created.
Yeah, Nep designed that actually. He's the one who like took the photographs of marble and text that was written by our dear friend Mikoyo Ali Barnes, who is a writer and a curator and an artist who is also incredible in the States. And he wrote on the show, and then Nep put it together and designed it so beautifully with his own calligraphic work. And it's in its second run. We did the first run with all the benefits going to towards relief for the Indian farmer protests. So all the proceeds went there. And then the second run is just the gallery got that made, and it's for sale now. So it's still available. Please go and buy the book. It's there.
It's very cool.
Enjoy.
Dubem, you're gonna say something.
I'm sorry,
and then I'm gonna ask a Kuma question and then go to the next question.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, Sunrun is orchestra. Like, I really love like the way they very, very abstract.
Come on.
Thinking.
And
things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really like, I mean, in the time and in the time of Sun Ra's great like of works, it was completely revolutionary, like it's people call it camp. I'm like, fuck that. Don't say that it's camp. Like he was like innovative at the highest of ideals. Like he used what was around, like costume set designers, prop designers that he knew, and he's like, let's build a world. We're gonna build a world.
Yes.
Where we're free and we're happy and things can move, and there's like spiritual progress as well as scientific progress moving in the same line. It's both as important, but we don't think like that in this day, So he was trying to remedy that to the best of his ability through his music, poetry, the culture he made. Anyways.
And I can see that directly in the object you guys made for that show. Just beautiful.
Oh, that's such a good compliment. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for Akum, because Rajni, I think Anik also talked about this as well, like world building, right? Did you ever imagine your work like directly as world building, or maybe like kind of like side by it, or something maybe you just thought about more with this show specifically, because we did create this world, right? But yeah, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts around that.
I think for me, yeah, in a way it is world building, because I consider most of like the characters I draw like almost like alter egos of like they're going against like things that are like, I guess, socially not acceptable or culturally and religiously not acceptable. So it's like just like rebelling against that and like creating these like alter egos almost of myself and like relating it to past experiences, almost like a comic book in a way. So like just my own way of like going against those like traditions and things. Yeah, so for me, yeah, it is sort of world building in its own way.
I have another question. This one's kind of open for everyone to answer. So this one is from Ren again, and it's, how do you think creating in/for spaces that are more removed from gendered / racialized harm has affected like the conceptualizing of your art?
Can you say that again? I don't. And then also in the transcript, it came up kind of weird, like the words got garbled in it.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. So how do you think creating in and for spaces that are more removed from gendered / racialized harm has affected the conceptualizing of your art?
Enforced spaces? You mean spaces that are guarding their safeness?
I guess like creating work that is like removed from like gendered or racialized like harm, and like thinking of your work outside of those kind of confines. I guess we kind of addressed it before, but like I guess what are kind of your thoughts about like the conceptualizing of your art within that kind of mindset where you're not like trying to relate
Also curious about Dudu's thoughts. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just realized, like, what is Dudu thinking?
Oh no, I was just, I think she heard it wrong. I was just trying to say, it's like, she's asking, how do you thinking about your work away from all of those ideas that you and Anik were talking about, those, racialized or gendered ideas, like thinking of your work outside of that, how does it affect you and how you come up with your work? I think that's the question.
I think the question is also tied to the space, the fact that the space is outside these places.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
How does,
sorry, go ahead, Tuban.
how do you think about your work in this space now, like this virtual space that is not tied to all those baggage and garbage?
Yes, exactly.
I feel like it was touched on already, but I don't know if Akuma or Raji want to add anything more to that. Maybe.
Yeah, I made the work for this exhibition kind of with the guidelines or like the good blessings of the collective itself, right? Like I saw those ideals reflected in what you all had to say about the work and the way that you were thinking about it when we first met. So I've always tried to operate outside of those confines anyway. I'm looking for the way to like move past all of that, as we've already said, and talk about bigger ideas with the work. So it always, when you free up the space and you work actively to think really big and to give your artists lots of freedom and don't hold them to stale ideas about making work, you'll always be blessed with cool, great new ideas in the work. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Raji.
Yeah.
I don't know
Thank you guys.
I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Akuma, at all. She's like, I'm good. So anyways, there's one last question. I don't think it'll take too long to answer. But how long, this one's for Odu. How long did it take to create this virtual gallery, like from start to finish? That's a good question.
It took, if it's the technical part, I had just like a month plus, which was very, 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 very difficult because with every little thing I had to watch like 30 minutes of YouTube. so it added a lot of extra time to how long it was supposed to take. But I think it took me about 2 months for the design, just because, the thing about designing something like this is you spend most of the time just fantasizing about the idea. You think about it, you dream about it, and then you do a little sketch and everything turns out crap, and then you stop and then you go back and you dream a little bit, and then you come back and you do a little sketch and there's something there, and then you say okay, and then you leave it, go away, and then dream about it again. So in general, the whole thing from the design to what you're seeing now took about, I would say, 4 months, but 3 to 4 months, but the technical part took about a month and some, I would say.
Yes, it was definitely.
When I was talking about my space, I was saying how, like, if I was like working in Rhino and doing what he was doing, I'd probably we probably won't start the show to like.
Yeah, Akub knows, like, it's the softwares I have to learn.
Yeah, I was so impressed that he learned this like so fast and like to this standard. Like it's like he's been doing this for years, and it was like, wow, no. Like if I was the one, probably would start in December. Yeah.
We have 2 minutes left, so I want to be able, I think there's no more questions, right, Shaneela? That's all the questions?
Yeah, that's all the questions. Yeah.
I just want to
Okay.
say one
Yeah.
more thing about Akum's work. I just love your work and the language you use, right? The visual language you use in your work, and how these stuffs are kind of very coded to different people, like different groups, and one of them is Nigerian, as how it's very subversive and it's very interesting. Like, I don't know, I'm just imagining what goes in your head when you're making this images. It's like because these things are, even with the titling and everything, right? They're not just what you see, just also the title gives it more context as a Nigerian. And it's like, and also the fact that it's like a journal, like you said, like you revisit and revisit and revisit, and there are fragments and there are different ways of working. So what is your, just maybe 1 minute of just like letting us know like your process of conceptualizing and how it goes, how long it takes?
I think something that's like influenced me a lot is because I read a lot of like these like folklore stories, and even like stories like, okay, the book I referenced like in the beginning about the chicken and the egg. It was like the book is about like sex and food. So it was really funny like how she brings like these things together and like talks about even like things that happen in society, but in almost a funny way. So for me, like reading those things kind of influences like the way I'm thinking about myself. And like sometimes it's like just I have like a memory of like going to an all-girls like Catholic boarding school, and like things like we would do like in our own like spare time and discussions we would have in private. So it's like me almost like journaling those moments in like a funny way, and like with the like titles, like it's just like saying those things like almost as a joke, and only people maybe who have lived like in Nigeria or like maybe gone to boarding school would understand those things. Like, okay, like the drawing I had that was titled Miss Nkebe Super, like it was like this song we used to sing during like in like the hostel as a joke. And it was like this thing, and like you get punished afterwards, like for doing that. And like girls would get suspended because they were wearing like clothes that showed off like their forms, their bodies. And it was like to like the nuns in school, it was like almost in a provocative way, but it was just like our own inside, like those are like moments of being free. So it's just like, for me, it's like expressing that in my own way. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna have to wrap it up because we're getting messages to wrap it up. So I'm gonna, before I pass over back to Dr. Anyaduba, I want to say, tell everyone to follow us on Instagram, Collective Patterns on Instagram, follow Rajni, follow Akum, follow Anik, keep up with their work. Also look out for all the different programs we have. We have lots of programming. You can't miss anything. Sign up for all the things. Also check out the website that Odudu made, which is amazing. And 10 out of 10, as we've talked about the entire talk about how amazing Odudu is. So please check it out. You have 3 months. There's no excuse. There's a lot of time. Look it up. Look at it. Thank you so much. And from myself, from Shaneela, from Chukwudubem, thank you so much to the artist, but then he'll take it over. I'm just saying the thank yous before too early, but thanks.
Yeah, thanks. This has been a very fascinating discussion. And I want to thank all the artists, Odudu, Rajni, Anik, Akum, Shaneela, and Chukwudubem, for sharing your amazing work and ideas with us. For me, it's been an inspiring session listening to you guys, especially listening to your different artistic processes and commitments. And the exhibition is terrific and inspiring. And I thought that what you guys did with the body especially is incredible, as well as the ways that you turned abstract, and I think this is a point Odudu made, turning abstract ideas into a powerful and usable narrative, right? Yeah, some points actually came up for me while listening to the discussion and looking at the ways that the artists portrayed the Black body. And this is something you guys have already talked about in very incisive ways that I kept taking notes for my class. Yeah, and I hear Rajni's and Anik's points about the need for a different kind of attitude required to doing and looking at these kinds of works. Attitude that breaks out from the singular narratives inscribed on racialized bodies. And I think with that insight, one is invited to appreciate the beauty of the Black body, its magic, the warmth that it inspires, as well the fragility of this body, the aura and its spirituality, right? Yeah, so that's the attitude I think that I want to take. Yet I also think that it's important to not ignore the question of white colonial power and the ways that this power could, and in fact has historically distorted and manipulated representations of racialized bodies for oppression and different kinds of subjugation. So I'm wondering about the work that artistically displaying the naked Black body, especially the naked Black female body, is doing. The violence historically done to this body has largely worked to render it publicly naked and irreverent. So why do I have to appreciate and encounter the artistic portrayal of this body again in its nudity? And doesn't this kind of representation of the Black body or the Black woman's body somehow perpetuate something that is already surplus about how we come to recognize or see this body publicly? Yeah, so some of these thoughts were in my mind, but then I realized that there's something else you guys are doing here, particularly in the structure of the exhibition itself, right? And I find the design of the exhibition space immensely profound. The shape of the petal, as Odudu explains, inspires that warmth and elegance and a sense of fluidity of meaning and encounter, right? So the fragility, I think, that the petal represents provokes for me deeper questions about the ways that racialized bodies exist in our world. But importantly, something Rajni and Anik also talked about, it's a space of sanctuary, right? Where we are invited to look with more care and nuance and generosity, right? So those are the things I'm taking away. So thank you guys again for these powerful thoughts and for putting together this fascinating exhibition. And thanks to all of you who joined us and for all your questions and comments. These conversations, as Mahlet has said, the conversations are continuing. You can check Gallery 1C03 website for more exciting events lined up this year. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.